They thought she was just a woman with a limp and an old dog. That was their first mistake. It would not be their last. The trail that cut through Gatineau Park in late October was not the kind of place most people chose after 4 in the afternoon. The light died early that time of year, sliding behind the ridge of spruce and birch like it had somewhere more important to be, leaving the path in that particular grey-blue dusk that makes distances hard to judge and shadows easy to misread. Most hikers had long since turned back toward the parking lot. Most people with any sense had. Lena Fairchild was not most people. She moved at a pace that looked unhurried from a distance, but covered ground with quiet efficiency up close. The kind of stride that comes not from leisure but from a body that has learned to measure every step, every incline, every exit. Her dark hair was pulled back under a wool toque, her jacket the sort of unremarkable olive green that blended into the tree line. She wore no headphones, she never did out here. Her eyes tracked the trail ahead, the ridge to her left, the gaps between the trees to her right, and periodically dropped to the animal moving at her heel. The dog's name was Beau. He was a Belgian Malinois, 6 years old, with tawny fur gone slightly silver at the muzzle, and a long white scar along his left flank that pulled the fur in a way that made strangers wince when they noticed it. To anyone watching, he looked like an aging working dog on a Sunday outing, ears up, nose working the cold air, keeping pace at Lena's left side without the benefit of a leash. To anyone who knew what they were looking at, he looked exactly like what he was. A former military working dog who had spent 4 years in some of the most unforgiving environments on Earth, and who still carried himself like he was on duty, because with Lena he always was. She had been walking these trails for 3 months. Since coming home to Ottawa after her medical release from the Canadian Armed Forces Joint Task Force 2, she had needed something to do with her mornings and her evenings that wasn't sitting in the apartment on Somerset Street staring at the ceiling. Her physiotherapist had suggested light hiking. Lena had looked at the woman for a long moment and then said, very quietly, that she would take it under advisement. She'd started the next day, Beau at her heel, the same trail, same time, building the distance week by week until her knee stopped talking back. No one at the Veterans Support Office knew she'd been JTF2. That was the point. They were at the bend near the old fire road when she heard the truck. It came in off the access gate farther south, a route that was gated, technically closed to vehicles after September, which meant whoever was driving had either a key or a bolt cutter and didn't particularly care which story they were telling. The engine sound was diesel, idling low, and then it cut entirely. Doors, 2 of them. Then a third. Beau's ears rotated a full 45 degrees without the rest of his body moving. Lena kept walking. She heard them before she saw them. Boots on gravel, the particular cadence of men who weren't trying to be quiet because it hadn't occurred to them that anyone in earshot might matter. 3 of them came around the bend from the direction of the fire road, spread loosely across the width of the trail. The one on the left was broad through the shoulders in a way that suggested he'd spent significant time either in a gym or doing physical labor, and his jacket was unzipped despite the cold. The one in the middle was shorter, stockier, with a grey beanie pulled low over his ears and his hands already in his front pockets. The one on the right was the youngest, mid-20s maybe, lean, carrying a length of metal pipe loosely at his side the way someone carries an umbrella when the sky looks uncertain. They stopped when they saw her, or rather, they didn't stop. They slowed, redistributed themselves slightly, so that they were no longer walking in a line, but rather forming a loose arc, which was either an unconscious territorial behavior or something considerably more deliberate. Lena noted the pipe. She noted the spacing. She noted the fact that none of them had their hands raised, that all 3 pairs of eyes moved to her and then dropped to Beau, and then came back to her with a quality she recognized, the recalibration of men deciding that what they were looking at was manageable. Hey, the one in the middle raised his chin. Didn't think anyone else would be out here this late, Apparently not, Lena said. She had stopped walking. Beau had stopped with her, still at her left side, still facing forward, ears fully upright. He hadn't made a sound. The broad one on the left was looking at Beau the way people look at unfamiliar dogs, not with fear exactly, but with the evaluative interest of someone running a quick risk assessment. "That your dog? Yes. He bite?" Lena looked at the man steadily. "Only when I tell him to." Something passed between the three of them. Not words, just the slight shift of weight, the micro-adjustment of posture that groups make when a dynamic is being negotiated. The one with the pipe set it against his shoulder. "We're actually going to need you to come with us," the middle one said. His voice had changed, dropped the conversational register, gone flat and practical in a way that was more unsettling than aggression would have been. "There's something back at the truck we need a hand with." "I'm not going to do that," Lena said. "It's not really a question." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." She watched the pipe come down off the shoulder. She watched the broad one's hands come out of his jacket and noted that the knuckles were scarred in a way that had nothing to do with outdoor work. She watched the young one on the right drift 2 steps to the side, trying to get outside her peripheral vision, and she turned her head just enough to let him know she'd clocked it. Beau made a sound then, not a bark, not a growl. Something lower, and more considered than either of those things. A sound that lived in the chest rather than the throat. "Your dog's nervous," the middle one said. "My dog's not nervous," Lena said. "My dog's paying attention. There's a difference." The one with the pipe took a step forward. "Last warning," Lena said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shift her stance or reach for anything or make any visible preparation for what came next. She simply said it the way you state a fact you expect to be understood. Clear, final, and completely without performance. The man with the pipe kept moving. What happened in the next 11 seconds would later be described, in the Provincial Police Incident Report, as a remarkably efficient neutralization of a 3-party threat scenario. The report would be written carefully, using the kind of language that keeps the paperwork tidy and the adjectives manageable. It would not capture the specific quality of the silence that fell over that trail in Gatineau Park, the kind of silence that comes after a sound too fast and too absolute to fully process. Lena said one word to Beau. "Cherche." Beau was already moving before the second syllable landed. He crossed the 3 meters to the man on the right in a low, flat sprint that covered the ground so quickly and so silently that the young man with the drift to the side had no time to process what was happening. Before 100 pounds of trained Belgian Malinois had his forearm in a grip that was not going to release on its own. The sound the man made was not quite a scream. It was the high, compressed sound of someone discovering that what they had evaluated as manageable was not, in fact, manageable. Lena moved left, the broad one swung, which was the right instinct, probably, if Lena had been standing where she'd been standing when he committed to it. She wasn't. She had stepped inside the arc of his swing, with a forward movement that closed distance, instead of retreating from it, and she used the momentum of his own rotation to redirect him into the tree line at the edge of the path. He hit the spruce hard with his shoulder, and the breath came out of him in a sound like a punctured tire. The middle one, the one who'd done the talking, the one Lena had read as the decision-maker from the first moment of the encounter, took 2 steps back and reached inside his jacket. "Don't," Lena said. She was looking directly at him, at his eyes. "I will end this conversation here, and I will end it in a way that neither of us wants," she said. "Or you will take your hand back out empty, and you will tell me what you're doing on this access road at this hour." The hand came out empty. The man on the right was still making sounds. Beau had not released him. He would not release him until Lena told him to, and Lena had not told him to. The broad one had pushed himself off the spruce and was standing with one hand against a birch tree, getting his breath back, not moving. "Who are you?" the middle one said. It was a genuine question. She could hear it, the recalibration again, but this time going in an entirely different direction. "Doesn't matter," Lena said. "What matters is that you answer my question before my patient's and your friend's arm run out of time together. What are you doing out here?" There was a long silence. In the distance, down toward the fire road, she could hear something she hadn't been paying attention to before. A sound that was mechanical and intermittent, like equipment being moved. The middle one looked at her for a long moment. He was rerunning something in his head. She could see it in his eyes, the quality of someone rapidly revising their assumptions. "Transport," he said finally. "We're moving product. We weren't supposed to have any civilians on this trail. What product?" Silence. "Beau," Lena said, without breaking eye contact with the man, and the sound from the man on the right went up an octave. "Medical equipment," the middle one said rapidly. "Restricted. It's federally regulated, all right? We're not supposed to be moving it without a permit, and we can't get a permit because—" He stopped. "Because it's not your equipment to move," Lena said. The man said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Lena had three things happening simultaneously in her mind. She had the active assessment of the physical space. Broad one recovering pipe, somewhere in the tree line. Young one controlled decision-maker 2 meters in front of her, and not yet neutralized. She had the tactical calculation, the angles, the variables. And she had the secondary thread, the one that had started when she heard that sound from the direction of the fire road, that was now pulling everything else into a different shape. She had been in Gatineau Park 100 times in 3 months. She had never heard that sound before. She keyed her phone with her left hand, thumb to a contact she had never expected to use from a trail in a provincial park, and she said 4 words when the line picked up on the second ring. "I need a timestamp." The voice on the other end didn't ask for context. That was the thing about people who had done the same kind of work. They understood that context could wait, and that timestamps could not. "Go," the voice said. "Fire Access Road, Sector 14, Gatineau North Quadrant. 3 individuals, possible stolen melon medical equipment. Vehicle sounds like a 3-ton running without lights. You're going to want eyes on this before they finish loading." A pause. Very short. "Hold position. Do not engage further. Are you contained?" Lena looked at the 3 men in front of her. The young one on the right had stopped making sounds. Beau had shifted his grip slightly but had not released. The broad one was upright and still and smart enough to stay that way. The decision-maker had both hands visible and his eyes on Lena with the focused, calculating attention of a man who had just realized he was in a problem he did not yet understand the edges of. "Contained," she said. She kept them there for 23 minutes. It was not the most comfortable 23 minutes of her life, but it was far from the worst. She stood in the cold with Beau holding his position and the 3 men holding theirs. And the light finished dying, and the temperature dropped another 2 degrees, and the sounds from the fire road went quiet about 7 minutes in, which told her the loading had either finished or been interrupted. She didn't say anything to the 3 men for most of those 23 minutes. There was nothing useful to say. The time for talking had ended when the pipe came off the shoulder. The Gatineau Park Authority vehicle came in from the main trail access. The RCMP tactical unit came in from the fire road. She heard the fire road team first. Controlled movement, multiple sets of boots, the specific cadence of people moving in a practiced formation through terrain. The broad one heard them too and turned his head, and in the moment his attention moved, Lena shifted her position by a meter without making a sound. By the time he looked back, she was somewhere different. When the RCMP corporal came around the bend with his hand on his sidearm and his vest catching the beam of the Gatineau vehicle's headlights, he took in the scene. 3 men in various states of stillness, 1 Belgian Malinois with his jaws still around a forearm, 1 woman standing in the middle of it, all looking like she'd been waiting for a bus. "Corporal Finch," Lena said, reading his shoulder ID in the light. They've got at least one vehicle down the access road. You've likely got a full manifest of what they were moving. I'd start with the cargo boxes on the east side of the clearing before they have a chance to rearrange." Corporal Finch stared at her for a moment. "Who are you?" he said. It was the second time in 23 minutes she'd been asked that question by a man who didn't know what he was looking at. "Just taking my dog for a walk," Lena said. She said it evenly, without a smile, without a trace of irony, which somehow made it land harder than either of those would have. She gave her statement to the RCMP, thorough, precise, sequenced correctly, no editorializing. She answered the questions she was asked, and didn't answer the ones she wasn't. She didn't explain Beau's service history, or her own training, or the contact she'd called, or why she had been able to hold 3 grown men in a forest for 23 minutes without a weapon and without raising her voice above conversational level. None of that was in the questions. They found 84 units of stolen medical isotopes in the cargo boxes on the east side of the clearing. The isotopes were the kind used in diagnostic imaging, regulated, tracked, worth considerably more on certain grey markets than their clinical applications suggested. 3 more individuals were detained at the Fire Road vehicle. The operation, as the report would eventually characterize it, had been running out of that access road for an estimated 6 weeks. Later, sitting on the tailgate of the RCMP van with a paper cup of coffee that was doing its best but not quite getting there, Lena watched them bring the decision-maker out in cuffs. He paused when he passed her. A voluntary pause, a choice, and looked at her in the flat, thoughtful way of someone still running the numbers. "You were never just a hiker," he said. "No," she agreed. "So what are you?" Lena looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Beau, who was sitting at her left side with his chin resting on her knee, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow and even. The particular posture he only ever took when he had decided a situation was fully resolved and his person was safe. She scratched behind his ear. "Retired," she said. The corporal who had asked who she was found her again as the scene was winding down, the vehicle's repositioning, the last of the cargo being documented and photographed in the beam of portable lights. "Can I ask?" he said in a tone that suggested he already suspected the answer would be unsatisfying. "What your background is, formally?" Lena handed him back his empty paper cup. "Former Canadian Armed Forces," she said. "Honorably released. Which unit?" She looked at him. He nodded slowly. "Right," he said. "Of course." She walked back to her truck through the dark, Beau at her left heel, his tags catching the last of the light from the RCMP vehicles. The trail was fully dark now, the birches bare-limbed and white against the black, the frost starting to settle on the ground in patches that would make the morning slick and bright. She had come out here because her physiotherapist had said light hiking would help her knee. 3 months in, the knee was better. Some habits, it turned out, were harder to leave behind than others. The ones that kept you alive tended to stick. The ones that made you scan exits before you sat down and keep your back to walls and listen for engines on roads that were supposed to be gated and always know exactly what was behind you. Beau pressed against her leg as they reached the truck, and she opened the back door, and he jumped in with the ease of long practice, turned once, and settled on his blanket. She stood there for a moment in the cold with her hand on the door, listening to the last sounds from the trail behind her. Radios, quiet voices, the methodical language of people doing paperwork. Then she got in, started the engine, and drove home through the dark Ottawa streets, Beau asleep in the back before they hit the main road. She thought, briefly, about calling her physiotherapist, telling her the hiking was going well, deciding against it. Some things, Lena Fairchild knew, were better left in the space between what people could see and what they couldn't, in the long shadow between the woman on the trail and whatever it was she had been before, between the limp that was getting better and the instincts that never would. She and Beau moved back into the city the way they always did, quietly, without announcement, fading into the ordinary dark of an October evening in Ottawa, like they had simply always been part of it, like they had never been anywhere else at all.